Joleen Beckham, and this is my informative interest speech on busting the myths of PTSD. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I didn't even consider having it before that point. The diagnosis was a shock to me because I believe the myths of PTSD. Because I suffer, I want to go on to become a psychologist so that I can help others who suffer as well. By the end of the speech, you will know what PTSD really is, what the myths are, why they are false, and why it is so bad to stigmatize someone who has PTSD. You will learn that PTSD is a stress response to a previous trauma. You will learn the common myths such as that only veterans get PTSD, and you will learn why it's so bad to stigmatize those myths. Based on those myths. First, we'll look at what PTSD is. So, what is PTSD? Well, like I said earlier, PTSD is a response to a previous trauma. So basically, whenever we are experiencing a traumatic event, we dissociate, we depersonalize it so that we can get through it. It's a survival skill that we have just built into us. Every single person in this earth has built into them. But after that trauma's over, and we don't need to survive anymore, that's when we start feeling the emotions from it. And that's what PTSD is. The symptoms are anxiety, flashbacks, hypervigilance, scanning the area for danger constantly, nightmares, the list goes on and on. But it basically feels like the event's happening again, even though it isn't. We know it isn't, but it feels like it is. And this can last every day, for months up to years. It's pretty bad. But despite what PTSD really is, there are so many myths that just lead to false information. The biggest one is that only veterans get PTSD. But while they do, a lot of times they do actually, but the majority of people who actually have PTSD are women. And the majority of those women suffered from domestic violence. I will now quote PhD Melanie Greensberg, quote, "The lifetime prevalence of PTSD is 5 to 6% in men and 10 to 12% in women. This means that women are almost double the rate of PTSD than men," unquote. That is from Psychology Today. Other myths are that people with PTSD are violent. In reality, people with PTSD have experienced such strong negative emotions. They've been there, they've felt everything. So they can empathize with people like no one else. They are able to recognize whenever somebody's feeling bad, and they don't want anybody to feel bad because they can relate. So we don't want anybody to feel bad, we want to make people happy. The other myths are that people who suffer from PTSD are delusional. Not true. Many people believe that flashbacks are actually delusions when they're not. They are intrusive negative memories that trigger those emotions that we talked about earlier. But those emotions are very strong, so I can see why someone who's not experiencing it but witnessing it would think that. But it's not true. Another one of the myths is that we are unable to function in society. No. We do quite well. For example, according to Inspire Malibu, Whoopi Goldberg, as a child, she witnessed this traumatic, horrifying plane crash, and she developed PTSD as a result. And despite being a little kid, she grew up to be this wonderful, beautiful, funny, smart actress that whenever we think about her, we don't think about the myths. We don't even know she has PTSD. We think about those traits that make her so wonderful. But now that we know about the myths of PTSD, we can avoid falling into that stigmatization. And it's important to know the truth about PTSD, because if you were suffering from it and didn't know it, you could get help. Because whenever you know, you would know what to do, you know? It's also important not to, it's very important to not contribute to the stigmatization, because it makes life so hard for those who have PTSD. Because they've already been through enough, they don't need that stigmatization. In conclusion, we can avoid this based on what we learned just now. So today we learned that PTSD is a stress response to a traumatic event that's happened in the past. We learned about the myths of PTSD, such as veterans are the only people that get PTSD. And we learned why those myths are false. And last but not least, we learned why PTSD should not be stigmatized, what it does to people. There are people who believe the myths, and then there are people who know the truth. Those who believe the myths often go on to hurt others because of false information. And that's not the way you want to live. But those who know the truth are able to help people with PTSD to understand and know. And that's where you want to be, and the truth, you know? But people with PTSD are not something to be afraid of. They are just like me. Their mothers, their family, your friends, even your doctor could have PTSD and you would never know it. But they are often the most caring people you will ever know because of what they've been through. But in the end, they need our support, not our stigma. Thank you.